My phone buzzed at 1 a.m. We found your son. I told them that's impossible. He's asleep beside me right now. The officer went silent for 3 seconds. Then he said, Sir, he's got your son's exact face. I drove there not knowing what I was about to find. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. The phone buzzed against the wood of the nightstand, and Nathan Callaway heard it before he understood it. He had been asleep less than an hour. His body still felt heavy, pinned down by the kind of tiredness that comes from 10 hours on a job site, and then coming home to make dinner, check homework, and fold laundry. The room was dark. The heater had shut off after midnight, and the cold crept in through the old window frame the way it always did in late October. He reached for the phone without turning on the light. His fingers found it by the vibration. The screen said Cedar Ridge, Oregon. No name, just a local number. He answered. Hello, Mr. Callaway? The voice was awake. Too awake. That was the first thing Nathan noticed. Nobody sounded like that at 1 in the morning unless they had a reason. Yes, this is Deputy Carter Bennett with the Cedar Ridge Police Department. Nathan sat up. The blanket slid off his shoulder, and the cold hit his skin. He put one bare foot on the floor. What's wrong? Sir, I'm calling because we found your son. For a moment, Nathan's mind refused to work. The words arrived in the wrong order. Found. Your son. Those two things did not belong in the same sentence, because his son was not lost. He turned his head. 6 feet away, in the second bed against the far wall, Mason was asleep. 8 years old. One arm hanging off the edge of the mattress. The blue dinosaur blanket kicked halfway down to his knees the way it was every single night. His mouth was open slightly. His breathing was slow and even. Nathan looked at him for 3 full seconds before he spoke again. My son is right here. Silence. Not the ordinary silence of a bad connection. Nathan had made enough phone calls in his life to know the difference. This silence had weight to it. It was the sound of a man on the other end deciding how to say something. Nathan lowered his voice and stood up. He crossed the carpet toward the hallway, careful with his steps, and pulled the bedroom door until it was nearly closed behind him. Deputy? Are you still there? I'm here, sir. Then say it. Bennett cleared his throat. Sir, the boy we found has your son's exact face. Nathan's stomach tightened. He put a hand on the wall. What? He's about 8. Dark hair, brown eyes. One of our units picked him up around midnight, walking along the shoulder of Route 9 outside town. When we asked who we should call, he gave us your name and this number. He says you're his uncle. The hallway floor was cold under Nathan's feet. He stared at the crack of light coming from under the bathroom door, and the whole picture snapped into focus so fast it made him dizzy. His brother's son, Lucas. Nathan hadn't seen the boy in almost a year. Not a birthday, not a holiday, not a phone call that lasted longer than 40 seconds before a woman's voice in the background said something, and the call ended. Lucas, Nathan said. His name is Lucas Callaway. That's the name he gave us. Is he hurt? He's not injured, no. He's tired and he's cold. He's been walking for a while. He won't tell us how long. Nathan closed his eyes. Where is he? Cedar Ridge Station. Main Street, next to the courthouse. I'm on my way. There was a short pause on the line, and Nathan could hear the deputy shifting, the sound of a chair, the low murmur of a radio somewhere behind him. Mr. Callaway, before you drive out here, I want you to know that there are some things about this situation we'll need to talk about in person. What things? In person, sir. Just drive safe. It's frosting up out there. The call ended. Nathan stood in the hallway with the phone still against his ear for another few seconds, listening to nothing. Then he moved. He pulled jeans off the back of the chair and a flannel shirt off the hook by the door, found his boots in the dark by touch, and grabbed the truck keys from the bowl on the dresser. Claire stirred under the blankets in the main bedroom when he stepped in. Nate! Her voice was thick with sleep. What time is it? Little after 1. She lifted her head. What happened? Police found Lucas. That woke her up completely. She sat up on one elbow. Derek's Lucas? Yeah. Found him where? Walking on Route 9. By himself. Midnight. Claire was quiet for a moment. Then she reached over and turned on the small lamp, and the light made them both squint. "Do you want me to come? Somebody needs to be here when Mason wakes up." She nodded slowly. She knew that was true, and she also knew it wasn't the whole reason. "Nate." She caught his wrist as he turned. "Whatever this is, don't go in there swinging." "I'm not going to swing. I've known you 11 years. He looked down at her hand on his wrist. He took a breath and let it out. "I'll call you when I know something." Before he left the house, he went back into Mason's room one more time. He didn't turn the light on. He stood beside the bed and looked at his son, at the shape of him under the blanket, at the slow rise and fall of his chest. He reached down and pulled the dinosaur blanket back up over Mason's shoulder. The boy shifted and mumbled something that wasn't a word and went still again. Nathan stood there longer than he needed to. He kept thinking about the deputy's voice saying, "We found your son," and how easy it had been to believe, for 1 second, that it might be true. How fast the floor could disappear. Somewhere out there, a boy with almost the same face had been walking alone on a highway in the dark. And nobody had called him. He shut the door quietly and went out to the truck. The windshield was white with frost. He started the engine and sat with his hands on the wheel while the defroster worked, watching the glass clear from the bottom up. His breath fogged in front of him. The dashboard clock said 1:19. The road out of his neighborhood was empty, past the town limits. The fields went black on either side, and the fog sat low over the ditches, thick enough that his headlights bounced off it and came back at him. Nathan drove with both hands on the wheel and thought about his brother. He thought about Derek at the kitchen table in their parents' old house, 17 years old, arguing that the reason he kept losing money on used cars was that people were basically good, and sometimes good people made mistakes. Nathan had told him that was a nice way to say he got cheated. Derek had laughed with his whole chest, the way he laughed at everything. Derek had been dead for 3 years. Nathan turned onto Main Street at 141. He had no idea, gripping that cold steering wheel, that a single phone call at 1 in the morning was about to pull open everything his brother's wife had spent 3 years burying. The Cedar Ridge police station was a low brick building with a flag out front and a parking lot that held maybe 12 cars. At that hour, there were 3. Nathan parked under the light and walked in at 142. The lobby smelled like burned coffee and floor cleaner. A woman behind the glass looked up, and a man in uniform came through the side door before Nathan had to say anything. He was younger than Nathan expected. Early 30s, short hair, tired eyes, a coffee cup in one hand that he set down as he came forward. "Mr. Callaway?" "Yes." "Carter Bennett." We spoke. They shook hands. Bennett's grip was firm and quick. "He's in the interview room. Before we go back, I want to tell you something." "Go ahead." "He hasn't asked for his mother once." Nathan looked at him. "Not once," Bennett said. "We've had him almost 2 hours. Most kids that age, first thing out of their mouth is 'Where's my mom?' He hasn't said her name." Nathan felt something cold settle in his chest. "Take me to him." Bennett led him down a short hallway with fluorescent lights that hummed. He stopped at a gray door with a small window in it and put his hand on the handle. "He's had 2 granola bars and a hot chocolate. He won't take a blanket." He opened the door. Nathan stopped. Lucas was sitting in a plastic chair that was too big for him, at a table that was too tall. He was wearing a gray sweatshirt 3 sizes too large, the sleeves hanging past his hands. His face was pale under the overhead light, with a chapped red patch across both cheeks from wind. His shoes were soaked through and dark. There was dried mud on the knees of his jeans and a long smear of it up one side, like he had gone down a slope on his hip. But it wasn't the dirt or the wet shoes that stopped Nathan in the doorway. It was the face. Same brown eyes. Same dark hair that grew forward at the front and never lay flat. Same narrow chin. And when the boy looked up, the same small dimple showed near the left side of his mouth, the exact spot where Mason had won. Nathan understood then why the deputy had said what he said on the phone. Anyone who had ever seen Mason Callaway would have made that call. Lucas looked up. "Uncle Nathan?" The voice was small and careful. It wasn't a greeting. It was a question, and there was something under the question that Nathan didn't like at all. He walked over. "Yeah, buddy. It's me." Lucas stood up. The chair legs scraped. For a second, the boy's hands came up an inch from his sides, and Nathan saw it, saw the beginning of a movement that would have ended in a hug. Then the hands went back down. Lucas gripped the ends of his sleeves instead. "Are you mad at me?" Nathan didn't answer right away. He pulled out the chair across from Lucas, then thought better of it and pulled out the one beside him instead and sat down so they were at the same level. "No," he said. "I'm not mad at you. Mom said you were." Nathan kept his face still. "It took effort. Your mom told you I was angry with you?" Lucas nodded. He looked at the table. "She said you didn't want me around anymore. She said after Dad died you told her you were done with us." The room was very quiet. Behind Nathan, the deputy stayed near the door and didn't move. "Who told you that?" Nathan asked. "Mom." "When?" Lucas shrugged with one shoulder. "A lot of times, like when I asked if I could go to Mason's birthday." Nathan felt his jaw tighten and made himself relax it. "Lucas, look at me." The boy looked up. "I never said that. Not one word of it. Not to her. Not to anybody. I know that now." "How do you know it now?" Lucas turned his cup slowly on the table. The hot chocolate was gone. There was a brown ring dried on the inside. "Because when the police asked me who to call," he said, "I said you." Nathan sat with that. He had spent 3 years telling himself he had done the reasonable thing, that backing off had been respectful, that Brianna was a widow raising a boy alone and she was allowed to set the terms, and that the right move was patience, and that eventually the door would open again. And the whole time, an 8-year-old had been carrying around the idea that his uncle had thrown him away. "How long were you walking?" Nathan asked. "I don't know. Best guess." Lucas thought about it. It got dark twice. Nathan's hands went flat on the table. He looked at the deputy. Bennett gave a small nod, the kind that meant we know, and Nathan looked back at the boy. "Where were you trying to get to?" Lucas didn't answer. "Lucas." "Here," he said finally. "Not the police. Your house. I got the road wrong." Nathan had lived at that address for 9 years. Lucas had been there maybe 6 times in his life, and not once since the funeral. "You remembered how to get to my house." "I remembered the gas station with the bear on the sign." Lucas rubbed his eye with the heel of his hand. "Dad used to stop there for the blue slushies." He said, "Don't tell Mom." Nathan laughed. It came out rough, and it surprised him. "He told me the same thing, about the slushies." He was 40 years old. Lucas smiled for the first time. It didn't last long, but it was there. Then it faded, and the careful look came back, and he said, "Am I in trouble?" "No." "Is she coming?" He said "Not Mom." Nathan noticed it. So did Bennett. "Not tonight," Nathan said. Lucas exhaled and slid down slightly in the chair, and the tension that had been holding his shoulders up finally let go. He was so tired that his eyes were already half closed. Nathan took off his flannel shirt and put it around the boy's shoulders. Lucas didn't refuse it. "I'm going to talk to the deputy for a few minutes," Nathan said. "Then we're going to figure out where you sleep tonight. I'm not leaving this building without you unless somebody with a badge tells me I have to. Understand?" Lucas nodded. Nathan stood, and as he did, the sleeve of the oversized sweatshirt slid back on the boy's left arm. Nathan saw it for half a second. A faded mark above the elbow, yellow-green, old. The kind of bruise becomes when it's on its way out. Lucas pulled the sleeve down fast. Nathan didn't say anything. He looked at the door, and he walked to it, and he waited until it closed behind them in the hallway before he turned to Bennett. "Deputy." "I saw it too," Bennett said quietly. They stood in the hallway under the humming lights. Bennett leaned against the wall and folded his arms. "How much do you know about the household?" he asked. "Less than I should. Give me the version you've got." Nathan rubbed the back of his neck. He hadn't said any of this out loud in a long time. "My brother's name was Derek. He was 4 years younger than me. Our dad ran a small framing crew, and we both grew up on it. I stayed in the trade. Derek didn't. He sold cars for a while, then insurance, then he ended up managing a parts warehouse in Millbrook. He passed 3 years ago. Heart. He had a condition he'd known about since he was 34, and he handled it about as well as he handled everything, which is to say he took the pills when he remembered." Nathan's voice stayed flat. He was 40. He went to bed one night and didn't wake up. Bennett nodded and let a beat pass. "And the wife?" "Brianna." Nathan said the name the way you say a word you've been avoiding. He thought about the first time he met her, at a cookout at his own house 11 years earlier. She had walked in with a pie she'd made herself and remembered Claire's mother's name after hearing it once. Nathan had liked her. That was the honest truth, and he had never been able to make it sit right since. She was good with people, he said. Really good. She remembered birthdays. She knew what to say when somebody was upset, and she'd say it at the exact right second. Derek was 30 when they met, and he was crazy about her. And then Lucas was born, and it changed. Not all at once. It happened so slowly that you couldn't point at any one thing. Bennett waited. Nathan kept going. She started handling the money. All of it. Derek's paycheck went into an account she managed. He'd tell me he wasn't good with numbers, and she was, and that was true, so it made sense. Then she started deciding who they saw. Family dinners got moved, then canceled. Then it was easier not to plan them. Did she have a problem with you specifically? Yeah. Nathan looked at the floor. Because Derek called me. When something was bothering him, I was the one he called. He'd be on the phone with me for an hour on a Sunday, and I could hear her in the room asking who he was talking to. That was the problem. Not me personally. The fact that he trusted somebody who wasn't her. So it got smaller. It got smaller every year. Christmas at their place became Christmas with a 2-hour window. 2-hour window became a phone call. Phone call became a text. Nathan let out a short breath. And I let it happen. I told myself he was a grown man, and it was his marriage, and I didn't get a vote. He remembered one specific afternoon. Derek in Nathan's driveway, tailgate down, sitting on the edge of the truck bed with a soda in his hand, saying, "She just wants us to be a unit." That's the word he used. A unit. And Nathan had said, "A unit that doesn't include your brother." And Derek had gone quiet and then changed the subject to the Blazers. That was the last real conversation they'd had. 18 months before he died. Then he passed, Bennett said. Then he passed. Nathan's voice didn't change. And she took everything. The house. The life insurance. The savings. His retirement account. Between the policies and the equity, it was a lot of money for a family like ours. He met Bennett's eyes. And Lucas, you tried to stay in his life. I tried for about a year and a half. What happened? There was always a reason. Nathan counted them off in a level voice. Lucas needs stability right now. He has enough family. Derek wouldn't want you interfering. That last one she used twice. She'd say it in this soft voice like she was trying to protect me from something. He stopped. And I bought it, he said. I told myself pushing would make it worse for him, that if I backed off and stayed calm, eventually she'd open the door. I sent birthday cards. I don't know if he ever saw them. Bennett didn't offer him any comfort, which Nathan appreciated. Mr. Callaway, I have to ask you a direct question. Ask. Do you have any legal standing with this child? Guardianship, court-ordered visitation, anything on paper? No. Nothing at all? Derek had a will. I know that because he told me he did, back when Lucas was a baby. He said he'd taken care of things. That was the whole conversation. I never saw a document. Bennett wrote something in a small notebook. That may end up matching, he said. Nathan looked back down the hallway toward the gray door. Through the small window, he could see the top of Lucas's head, the dark hair sticking up in the front. The boy slumped sideways in the too big chair with Nathan's flannel shirt over his shoulders. He had fallen asleep sitting up. Nathan had been standing in the same spot in his own bedroom 2 hours ago, watching a boy who looked exactly like that one sleep in a warm bed under a blanket with dinosaurs on it. 2 boys. The same face. Different lives. Something in Nathan's chest went hard and quiet, and it did not go soft again for a very long time. Deputy Bennett. Sir, on the phone you said there were things we'd need to talk about in person. Bennett straightened off the wall. He looked down the hall in the direction of an office with a light on. Yes, sir. There are. He tucked the notebook into his chest pocket. And I'd rather show you than tell you. Come with me. The office was small. A desk, 2 chairs, a computer monitor turned at an angle, a corkboard with a duty roster, and a faded safety poster on it. Bennett shut the door and pulled a folder off the top of a stack. He set it on the desk in front of Nathan and pushed it across. Open it. Nathan opened it. The first page was a form. Standard county layout, boxes and lines, a case number stamped in the corner. Halfway down, in the field marked missing person, was a name typed in capital letters. Lucas Derek Callaway. Age 8. Nathan's eyes moved to the date in the top right corner. He read it twice. Then he looked up. This was filed 4 days ago. Yes, sir. 4 days. Nathan's voice stayed even, which took work. There's been an active missing child report on my brother's son for 4 days. That's correct. Then why has nobody called me? Bennett sat down on the edge of the desk. Because you're not on it. What does that mean? It means exactly that. Bennett reached over and turned to the second page. Emergency contacts. Family members to be notified. Persons the child might attempt to reach. All 3 of those fields. He tapped the paper. Your name is not in any of them. Nathan looked at the boxes. There was a name he didn't recognize, a woman in Salem listed as a friend. There was a grandmother on Brianna's side. There was a coworker. There was no Nathan Callaway. No address in Cedar Ridge. No phone number. Nothing that would have led a single officer in this county to the man the boy had actually been walking toward. He's got one uncle, Nathan said. One. His father's brother. He's the only blood relative that kid has left on that side, and I live 31 miles from that house. I know. I've had the same number for 12 years. I know, Mr. Callaway. Nathan set the folder down very carefully because the alternative was throwing it. Deputy, when a child goes missing, does the parent fill this out themselves? The reporting party provides the information. We write it down. Bennett's jaw moved. We asked specifically, who might the child go to? Who does he like? Who does he talk about? It's one of the first questions, because 9 times out of 10 that's where they turn up. It's the whole reason the field exists. And she gave you a coworker. She did. Nathan stared at the wall for a moment. That's not an oversight. I'm not in a position to characterize it. You don't have to. I just did. Bennett let that go by. Then he leaned forward and turned back to the first page and put one finger on the date field again. That's not actually the part one brought you in here for. There's more. Look at the date of the disappearance. Not the date of the report. The date she says he left. Nathan looked. Tuesday. Evening. Approximately 7:30 p.m. Okay. Now go back out there, Bennett said, and ask him when he left. Nathan stood up. They walked back down the hallway together. Bennett opened the door quietly. Lucas was still asleep in the chair, head tipped, one hand curled under his chin. Nathan crouched beside him and put a hand on his shoulder, gently. Hey, Lucas. The boy came awake fast, the way kids do when they've learned to. His eyes opened wide, and he sat up straight before he was even fully awake, already checking the room. It's me. It's okay. Sorry. Lucas rubbed his face. I wasn't sleeping. You were. That's allowed. Nathan stayed at eye level. I need to ask you something, and I need you to think about it carefully. Not fast. Carefully. Okay. What day did you leave the house? Lucas frowned. Thursday. You're sure? Yeah, because it was after art. Art's Thursday. He said it like it was obvious. I put my bag in my closet during math so I could get it after. You packed a bag at school on Thursday. Yeah. And you left Thursday evening. After dinner. She wasn't home. Lucas paused. I waited until it was dark so nobody would see me on the road. Nathan kept his face completely still. Thank you, buddy. Go back to sleep. He stood and turned around. Bennett was already looking at him. They stepped back into the hallway, and Nathan felt his own pulse in his neck. She reported him missing on Tuesday, Nathan said. That's what the report says. He didn't leave until Thursday. That's what the child says. So for 2 days there was a missing person report on a boy who was sitting in his own house. That is exactly the problem, Bennett said. And to be clear with you, sir, I'm not accusing anybody of anything tonight. Kids get days wrong. It happens constantly. That's why we don't move on one statement from an 8-year-old at 2 in the morning. He didn't get it wrong. He tied it to art class. I heard him. Bennett rubbed his eyes. I heard him, and I've been doing this 11 years, and I'll tell you honestly that's a better anchor than most adults give me. Nathan looked at the closed door. What happens now? Now we do this properly, which means slowly. Bennett held up a hand before Nathan could speak. Tonight he's safe. That's tonight's job. Tomorrow I file a supplemental report on the timeline and the mark on his arm, and it goes to the county. Child Services gets a copy. And then people who do this for a living start asking questions. And where does he sleep tonight? Bennett looked at him for a long moment. There's an emergency placement process. There's also a version where a blood relative with no record and a stable home takes temporary physical custody with a caseworker's sign-off and a follow-up in the morning. He picked up the desk phone. I'm going to wake somebody up. Sit down. Nathan sat down in the plastic chair in the hallway. He looked at the ceiling tiles and thought about a form with 3 empty boxes on it. Not one of them had his name. That wasn't a mistake made by a panicked mother. A panicked mother lists everybody. A panicked mother lists the mailman if she thinks it will help. You only leave a name off a form like that if you are afraid of what happens when that person picks up the phone. The call took 40 minutes. At 3:20 in the morning, a caseworker named Devin Ruiz met them at the station in a raincoat over pajama pants, asked Nathan 11 questions, made 2 calls, and signed a form. At 3:55, Nathan carried his nephew out to the truck. Lucas woke up halfway across the parking lot and insisted on walking. Nathan let him. Over the next several days, Nathan started to learn what had actually happened after his brother died. It didn't come all at once, and it didn't come from any single dramatic source. It came the way real information comes, in pieces, from a phone call here, and a name there, and a document he'd never thought to ask for. The first piece came from Walt Hendricks, who had worked beside Derek at the warehouse for 6 years. He talked about you every day, Walt said. Man never shut up about you. Nathan had to put his coffee down. I'm calling about his wife. There was a pause on the line. Yeah, Walt said. Okay. That's a fast okay. Well, Walt exhaled. She came to the Christmas party. With a fella. Look, I'm not one of those people who thinks a widow's got to wear black for 10 years. It was the timing. That's all. 9 weeks. Nathan wrote the date down. The second piece came from the bank. He hadn't expected to get anywhere, and he didn't, not directly. But he did get one thing, because Nathan Callaway's name was on a piece of paper he had genuinely forgotten existed. 8 years earlier, when Lucas was a baby, Derek had set up an account for his son. A custodial fund, protected, meant for education and for the boy's future. Derek had asked Nathan to sit in the branch office with him that afternoon because he didn't understand half the forms, and Nathan had been listed as a successor contact on the account. Not a signer, not a trustee with power, just a name on a line, put there and forgotten by both of them. But a name on a line was enough to make the branch manager willing to have a careful, extremely limited conversation, and it was enough to make Nathan understand what he was looking at. Money had been leaving that account. Not once. Repeatedly. Nathan sat in his truck in the bank parking lot afterward with his hands on the wheel and did not start the engine for 10 minutes. Because Brianna had spent 3 years telling anybody who would listen that she was barely holding on. That Derek had left them with nothing. That she was doing it alone. Nathan had heard it secondhand from a cousin, and he had believed it, and he had felt guilty about it, and he had sent a check once that came back uncashed. She had not been struggling. The picture he assembled over the following 2 weeks came from things that were not hidden at all, because she had never thought she'd have to hide them. Her own public posts. A car in the driveway that had not been there 3 years ago. Restaurants. Weekend trips to the coast. Clothes. A phone upgrade every year, and one for the man she was seeing. A living room set. A cruise deposit. And underneath all of it, withdrawals from a fund with an 8-year-old's name on it. Nathan sat with that for a long time. He thought hard about the part he was not going to let himself get wrong. She was allowed to date. Her husband had died. She was 38 years old, and she had a right to a life. And Nathan had no interest in being the kind of man who stood in judgment of a widow for going out to dinner. He had told himself that deliberately out loud alone in his truck because he wanted to be sure the anger in him was pointed at the correct thing. It wasn't the dating. It wasn't the coast trips. It wasn't even the man. It was the source of the money. It was a boy walking on the shoulder of Route 9 in the dark and wet shoes because there had been nothing at home to keep him there, while the account his father had built for him got smaller every quarter. Nathan did not call her. He thought about it. He sat with his phone in his hand one night after everyone was asleep and pulled up her number and looked at it. He knew exactly how that call would go. She would cry. She would be devastated that he thought so little of her. She would explain that the account had been used for Lucas, for the mortgage, for his benefit, and every word of it would come in that soft, wounded voice she had. Then she would hang up and start cleaning up. That was the thing about Brianna. She wasn't stupid. Warning her would only make her better prepared. So Nathan put the phone down. The next morning he made copies of everything he had, put it in a manila envelope, drove to the county building, and handed it to the investigator whose name Bennett had given him. He wrote a short cover letter listing what each item was and where it came from, and he signed it. Then he went to work and framed a garage. Claire asked him about it that night while they were doing dishes. "You gave them everything?" "Everything I've got. And you don't want to say anything to her?" "Not one word." Nathan set a plate in the rack. "I want facts," he said. "Not revenge. Revenge is a conversation where I feel good for 4 minutes and she gets a 2-week head start." Claire dried her hands and leaned against the counter. "You're being very calm about this." "I'm not calm." "I know." She looked at him. "That's what worries me." It came out on a Thursday evening, 9 days after the phone call, and it came out because Nathan finally stopped asking. Lucas had been in the house a week and a half by then. Devin Ruiz had come twice. There were forms on the kitchen counter in 3 stacks and a court date circled on the calendar. Lucas had been polite the entire time. That was the word for it. Polite. He said please and thank you. He took his plate to the sink without being asked. He asked permission to use the bathroom twice before Nathan told him he didn't have to do that here. He was the easiest, quietest, most agreeable child Nathan had ever had under his roof, and every day of it made Nathan's chest hurt worse. That night Claire took Mason to his swim lesson. The house went quiet in a way it hadn't been since Lucas arrived. Nathan made grilled cheese and tomato soup, which was the only thing he genuinely knew how to cook well, and set a plate down in front of the boy at the kitchen table. The rain had started outside, light against the window over the sink. "You don't have to tell me anything tonight," Nathan said. He sat down across from him with his own plate and started eating. He had decided that afternoon that he was done asking questions. Everyone he'd asked in 10 days had produced a shrug, a maybe, and I don't remember. So he stopped. He ate his sandwich and let the rain fill the silence. For minutes went by. Then Lucas said, "Can I stay here?" Nathan looked up. "Yes." "For how long?" "For as long as it takes, and then longer than that." Lucas pushed a corner of his sandwich around the plate. "Even if Mom gets angry?" "Yes." "Even if she says stuff about you?" "She can say whatever she wants." Nathan put his sandwich down. "It doesn't move me an inch." Lucas's chin started to shake. He fought it. Nathan watched an 8-year-old fight his own face and lose, and the tears came, and the boy wiped at them fast with the back of his wrist like he was embarrassed. Nathan didn't reach for him. He had learned something in 10 days about this kid, which was that being touched while he was upset made him go rigid. So he just stayed where he was and said, "Take your time." And then it started coming. It came out of order, in fragments with long gaps between them, and Nathan sat completely still through all of it and did not interrupt once. It started with the nights. Sometimes she goes out. Okay, like it's 7, and then she comes back and it's light out. Nathan's hands went flat on the table. "How often?" "I don't know." "A lot. More in the summer." Lucas shrugged. "It's fine. I know how to do the microwave." "How old were you when that started?" 7, I think. "After we moved." "Was anybody there with you?" "No." He said it like it was a strange question. "I lock the door, and I don't answer it." Nathan looked at the rain on the window and made himself breathe. Then it moved to the arguments. "She gets mad if I say anything about it. Like if I say I don't want to be by myself. She says I'm making her feel guilty on purpose." "Did she ever put her hands on you?" Lucas stopped. Nathan waited. He counted to 20 in his head. "One time she grabbed my arm," Lucas said. "Really hard. Because I wouldn't get in the car." He touched the spot above his left elbow through the sleeve without seeming to notice he was doing it. "It was purple for like 2 weeks. I wore long sleeves for gym. And one time she hit me in the face." He said it very fast and then looked at the table. "Just once. It was an argument. I said something bad." "What did you say?" "I said Dad wouldn't have left me alone." The rain kept going against the window. "She told me I was ruining her life," Lucas said. "She says that a lot. That she'd have a whole different life if it wasn't for me. That she gave up everything." Nathan's voice, when it came, was very quiet and very level. That's a lie. I know. Do you? Lucas didn't answer that. Then he lifted his head, and he said the thing that changed the shape of the whole case. Mom told me Dad left all his money for her. Nathan went very still. She said that to you. She said Dad didn't leave me anything. She said he loved her most, and that's why. And she said I should be grateful, because she doesn't have to keep me. Lucas. Nathan leaned forward. Listen to me. That is not true. Your dad set up an account for you when you were a baby. I was in the room when he did it. I sat in a chair next to him and watched him sign the papers, and he complained about the pens the whole time. Lucas stared at him. For me? For you. For school. For a car someday. For a house someday. He was 29 years old, and he was already planning your life out. The boy's face did something complicated. She said, I know what she said. Lucas wiped his face again with his sleeve. His breathing had gone uneven. There's one more thing, he said. Go ahead. She said if I told anybody about the nights, or the arm, or any of it, she'd send me away. Nathan felt the room narrow. Send you away where? I don't know. Lucas's voice cracked. She never said where. She just said there's places for kids who lie about their mothers, and I wouldn't come back, and nobody would come get me because nobody wanted me anyway. He looked up, and there it was, the reason for the question in the police station at 2 in the morning. Because you were mad at me. Nathan put both hands over his mouth for a second, and then took them away. That's why I left, Lucas said. Because I figured if I was going to get sent somewhere anyway, I'd rather pick. The rain filled the next 30 seconds. Then Nathan stood up, walked around the table, and crouched down beside the chair. I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to remember it, he said. You're not going anywhere. Not to a place. Not back there. Nowhere. You're going to write down anything else you remember, whenever you remember it, and I'm going to give all of it to the people whose job it is. And she is never going to be alone in a room with you again. Lucas looked at him with red eyes. Promise? I don't make promises I can't keep, Nathan said. That one I can keep. Upstairs, the front door opened and Mason's voice came through the house, loud and complaining about chlorine. Lucas wiped his face fast and sat up straight. Nathan stood and gave him 10 seconds to put himself back together because the kid clearly needed it, and then called out, In here. She came the next morning at 9:15. Nathan heard the car before he saw it. He was in the front room with a coffee, and a silver sedan he didn't recognize pulled up to the curb and stopped, and a second car pulled in behind it. Claire came out of the kitchen. Who is that? Take the boys upstairs. Nate, now. Both of them. Mason, too. Turn on the TV loud. Claire moved. Nathan set his coffee down on the windowsill and watched Brianna get out of the car. She looked different, thinner in the face. Her hair was pulled back. She was wearing a plain gray cardigan and no makeup that he could see, which struck him immediately as a choice, because Brianna Callaway did not leave a house without makeup. The man from the second car walked up beside her. 50-ish, gray suit, leather folder under one arm. He didn't look worried. He looked like a man about to do a task. Nathan opened the front door before they knocked and stepped out onto the porch. He pulled the door shut behind him. The morning was cold. Frost on the grass. His breath showed. Brianna stopped at the bottom of the steps. Nathan. Brianna. Her eyes were already wet. That was fast, he thought, even for her. Where is my son? Inside. Is he all right? He's had 4 hot meals and 11 hours of sleep a night for 10 days. So he's better than he was. Her mouth tightened for a fraction of a second, and then the softness came back over it. I want to see him. No. Nathan. She took one step up. I have not seen my child in 2 weeks. Do you understand what that's been like? Do you have any idea? I think I've got some idea. Then let me see him. Not without the authorities present. Nathan kept his voice flat. There's a caseworker. Her name's Devin Ruiz, and her number's on the paperwork you were served. You call her, and she sets up a supervised visit, and I'll follow whatever she tells me to the letter. The attorney spoke for the first time. Mr. Callaway, my client has full legal custody of that child. There is no court order in place restricting her contact. What you're describing has no legal basis. Then get one that says so, and bring it to me, and I'll open the door. That's not how this works. It's how it's working today. Brianna's face changed. The wet-eyed softness slid off it like a coat. "You have no right," she said. "No right at all to keep my child from me. Do you understand who you're talking to? I'm his mother." "I haven't taken your child," Nathan said. "Get that straight before you say it again in front of anybody who writes things down. I didn't come get him. I didn't call him. I didn't put an idea in his head. The police found him, walking, alone, on the shoulder of a state highway, at midnight, 9 miles from a house where nobody had noticed he was gone. I reported him missing." Her voice went up. "I reported him missing, Nathan. I did everything right. I was out of my mind." "Yeah." Nathan took one step forward. "Let's talk about the report." The attorney's head came up. "You reported him missing Tuesday evening," Nathan said. "You told him he walked out around 7:30 on Tuesday." "Because he did. He left Thursday." The porch got very quiet. Nathan watched it happen. He watched the exact moment it landed, and it was not what most people would expect. She didn't gasp. She didn't get angry. Her face simply stopped moving. Everything on it went still, the way a screen goes still when a video is paused, and for about 2 full seconds Brianna Callaway was not performing anything at all. Then she said, "That's not." "Don't," the attorney said sharply. "He's confused," she said. "He's a little boy. He's been through." "Brianna?" The attorney put a hand on her arm. "We aren't discussing this here." She stopped talking. The lawyer looked up at Nathan, and his expression had changed slightly. Not friendlier, more careful. "Mr. Callaway, we'll be in contact through the proper channels." "Good," Nathan said. "That's all I've ever asked for." He looked at Brianna one more time. "You told him his father left him nothing." Her jaw moved. "You told an 8-year-old boy that his dad didn't love him enough to leave him anything. You said that out loud, to his face, in a house Derek paid for." I was there when Derek opened that account." Nathan's voice never rose. "Not once. 19 years I knew that man better than you did on your best day. And I let you tell me for 3 years that I was interfering, and I backed off, and I sent cards to a kid who thought I hated him." He stepped back and put his hand on the doorknob. "That's the part one own," he said. "That one's mine. I'll carry it. But we're done now." "Nathan, please." And there were real tears in it now, or something close enough that he couldn't tell the difference. "He's all I have left of Derek." Nathan looked at her for a long moment. "No," he said. "He's all Derek left of himself. That's not the same thing, and it never was." He went inside and closed the door. He stood in the front hall with his hand still on the knob and listened. Upstairs the TV was going, some cartoon, and Mason was laughing at something. Through the window, he watched her stand at the bottom of the steps for maybe 15 seconds, not moving, the attorney already halfway to his car. Then she turned and walked back down the path. Nathan knew exactly what came next. She would fight. She had money, or access to money, and a lawyer, and 3 years of practice at telling a version of events in a soft voice that made people want to believe her. She would be very good at it. But she was walking to her car with one piece of information she didn't have. She still thought this was a fight between her and him. It wasn't. It hadn't been since 1:07 in the morning on a Sunday. The county had a supplemental report, a caseworker's file, a manila envelope full of bank records, and a discrepancy in a timeline that nobody could explain. The investigation had already started. The investigation took 9 weeks. Nathan had expected something else. He'd expected a break. A moment. Some point where a person in a suit walked into a room and set a single piece of paper down, and everything changed. That never happened. What happened instead was slow and boring and relentless, and it was the most effective thing Nathan had ever watched. There was no secret witness. Nobody hired a private investigator. Nobody got a phone call at midnight with a confession on it. People with badges and county email addresses simply started at one end of a family's life and worked their way to the other, writing everything down. They talked to a woman named Priya Raval, who had babysat Lucas for 11 months when he was 6. She told him she had been called at 9 at night more than a dozen times and asked to come sit until morning, and that she had quit after the 4th time she showed up at a dark house and found the boy already asleep on the couch with the front door unlocked and no adult in the building. They talked to the neighbor on the east side, a retired man named Gordon Pike, who said he'd heard shouting twice in the last year and a child crying afterward both times, and that he'd thought about calling somebody and hadn't, and had been thinking about it ever since. They talked to the school. The counselor at Millbrook Elementary had a file. Lucas had gone from a child who talked constantly to one who didn't raise his hand at all. There were 3 notes about him falling asleep in class. There was a documented conversation from the previous spring in which a teacher asked him why he was so tired, and he said he'd been up late and then wouldn't say anything else. They pulled his medical records. A pediatrician had noted a healing bruise on the left upper arm at a checkup 14 months earlier and written down the explanation given at the time, which was that he'd fallen off a bike. The doctor had also written, in a separate line, that the mark was not consistent with the mechanism described. That line had sat in a file for over a year. Nobody had followed it. Now somebody did, and then the financial investigators got involved, and that was where it stopped being a matter of interpretation. Nathan was not in those rooms. He got the summary later, in a hallway, from a woman who chose her words carefully. But the shape of it was simple enough for anybody to understand. The custodial account Derek had opened for his son was not a general savings account. It had a specific purpose written into it. The money in it belonged to Lucas. An adult managing it was permitted to use it for the child's benefit and for nothing else, and every dollar out of it was a decision that had to survive that test. Over 3 years, a great deal of money had left that account. Investigators matched the withdrawals to what they bought. That part took time, and it was the part Brianna had never imagined anyone would do. A withdrawal in March matched a hotel in Cannon Beach. One in July matched a deposit on a cruise. There were restaurant charges, a men's watch, a payment on a car that was not in Lucas's name and never would be. None of it was necessity. None of it was the mortgage or the electric bill or school clothes or a doctor's visit. Brianna's answer, when they asked her, was grief. Nathan had to give her credit. It was the smartest possible answer, and she delivered it well. She said she had been drowning after her husband died and had not understood the rules of the account. She said she had made mistakes because she was in pain and nobody was helping her, and that if she had taken money that wasn't hers, she was sorry and she would pay it back. It might even have worked. It might have gotten her a repayment order and a stern lecture and a second chance, because that answer is designed to make a room feel sorry for you, and a lot of rooms do. But there was the other thing, the missing person report. Filing a false report is not a gray area. It is not a paperwork error, and it is not grief. When a person walks into a police station and states that a child disappeared on a night the child was in fact at home, she has caused officers to search a 2-day window that never existed, and every hour spent looking in the wrong place is an hour taken from something real. They asked her about the date. First, she said she had made a mistake. She'd been panicking. She got the days confused. Then, 2 weeks later, she said something different. She said Lucas had told her in advance that he intended to leave, and she had reported it early because she was frightened, and she had been trying to protect him. Then, in a third interview, she said the boy's account could not be trusted because Nathan Callaway had gotten to him. She said Nathan had always wanted the child. She said he had spent years turning Lucas against her, and that this entire thing had been engineered by a man who resented her for marrying his brother. Nathan heard about that one from Devin Ruiz in the parking lot outside the county building, and he stood there with his keys in his hand and felt nothing much at all. That's her third version, he said. It is. They know that, right? Ruiz gave him a look that was almost a smile. Mr. Callaway, she said, we write all of them down. That's the entire job. We write them down, and we put them in order. That was the moment Nathan understood how this was going to end. Brianna's whole life had been built on one skill. She could tell a story to a person's face and make them believe it. She had done it to Derek. She had done it to Nathan. She had done it to a school counselor, a pediatrician, and probably to herself. But that skill only works on one person at a time. It does not work on a folder. The thing that broke it open had been sitting in an evidence locker for 6 weeks, logged as ordinary property. A blue backpack. Lucas had been carrying it when the patrol unit picked him up on Route 9. Inside it there had been 2 shirts, a pair of socks, a phone charger with no phone, $11 in bills and coins, a photograph of Derek in a plastic sleeve, and a school notebook with a bent cover. Nobody had looked past the first few pages of the notebook, because the first few pages were exactly what you'd expect. Spelling lists, multiplication tables, a half-finished drawing of a dragon. It was Bennett who went back to it. He told Nathan later that it had bothered him for a month. That a kid who planned a runaway carefully enough to pack his bag at school and wait for dark would not carry a school notebook by accident. The back third of the notebook was not schoolwork. Starting about 18 months earlier, Lucas had been keeping a record. He hadn't called it that. He hadn't written a single sentence explaining what he was doing or why. There was no title on the page. It was just entries, in pencil, in a boy's handwriting that got neater over time. Dates, times, short lines, the nights his mother left and what time she left, the time she came back when he was awake to see it, the arguments with a word or two about what they'd been about, the day she grabbed his arm, with the word car next to it, the day she hit him, with 3 words about what he had said first, the threats, written down flat, without any drama in them at all, the way a kid writes down homework. And on one page, near the end, a line with a date on it that made the room go quiet when it was read aloud. It was the day she told him she had already reported him missing. That date was 2 days before he left. Nathan read a photocopy of that page in a conference room with a lawyer sitting across from him and had to set it down and look out the window for a minute, because it explained something he hadn't been able to make sense of. He had assumed the false date was a panic, a mother covering a gap in her own attention, inventing 2 extra days to explain why she hadn't noticed sooner. That would have been ugly, but it would have been human. It wasn't that. She had filed the report while the boy was still in the house, and then she had told him she'd done it, to his face, because it was a threat, and it was the best one she had. Look what I've already put in motion. Look how easy it would be for you to disappear, and for everyone to believe you ran. She had built the story before she needed it. She had told a police department that her son was gone while her son was sitting in his bedroom 2 days from deciding she was right about one thing, that he could not stay. By itself, a notebook proves nothing. Nathan understood that. A child can write anything. A defense attorney would say exactly that, and one did. But the notebook did not exist by itself. It sat next to a babysitter's statement about the same nights, next to a neighbor's account of shouting on a date that appeared in pencil on a page, next to a pediatrician's note about a bruise that matched a line reading "She grabbed my arm hard," written 11 days before that appointment, next to phone records that put a phone in a coastal town on nights the notebook said the house was empty, next to bank statements with matching dates, and the department's own record of when the report was filed. Every independent thread landed on the same place. An 8-year-old boy, with no legal training and no adult helping him, had accidentally built the most reliable document in the entire case, simply by writing down what happened on the day it happened. Nathan thought about that a great deal afterward. He thought about a kid alone in a locked house at 10 at night, getting out a pencil. Not to complain, not to show anyone, just to be sure that one person in the world had the days right, in case someday it mattered. The custody hearing was in December, in a courtroom with radiators that clanked. Nathan hated every minute of it. He hated that Lucas had to be in the building at all. He hated the small room with the beige chairs where the boy waited. He hated that a 9-year-old, because he'd had a birthday by then, had to sit anywhere near a proceeding about his own mother. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Judge Alarcon, who had a flat voice and did not appear to be impressed by anyone. Brianna's attorney gave a good argument. Nathan listened to all of it. He said she was a widow who had lost her husband suddenly and been left to raise a child alone, with no support from a family that had shut her out. He said she had made errors of judgment about money during a period of profound grief and was prepared to make full restitution. He said the missing person report was a mother in a panic getting a date wrong, and that the state was building a case on the memory of a small child coached by an uncle with an obvious motive. He said, and Nathan had to admire the nerve of it, that the real story here was a man who had never accepted his brother's marriage and had waited 3 years for an opportunity. Nathan did not react. That was a decision he had made in the parking lot that morning, sitting in his truck. Claire had asked him if he was ready, and he'd said the only thing I have to do and there is nothing. Because he understood the trap. If he got loud, if he glared, if he shook his head at the wrong moment, he would hand them exactly the man they were describing, an angry uncle with a grudge. So he sat with his hands folded and his face empty and let the documents do it. And the documents did it. The state laid it out in order, without adjectives. The report and its filing date. The child's account of the day he left, backed by an art class attendance record and a teacher who remembered a boy asking to put a bag in a closet, the babysitter, the neighbor, the counselor's file, the pediatrician's line, the financial summary with its columns of match dates, and then the notebook. The defense objected to it. The judge allowed it, with limits. Nathan watched Brianna while that section was read. She sat very straight. She did not look at the exhibit. She looked at a point on the wall about 4 feet above the clerk's head, and she stayed there for 11 minutes. When it was over, Judge Alarcon took a short recess and came back in 20 minutes. She spoke for less than 5. She said that the court was not making findings on criminal matters, which were not before her. She said that her sole concern was the immediate welfare of the child. She said that the record showed a pattern of unsupervised overnight absences, a documented physical injury with an unexplained mechanism, statements from multiple independent adults, and a discrepancy in a police report that the mother had given 3 different accounts of. Then she said that Lucas would remain in the physical custody of Nathan Callaway, pending the outcome of the ongoing investigations, that Brianna Callaway's custody was suspended, and that any contact would be supervised and arranged through the department. Nathan let out a breath he had been holding for 9 weeks. Beside him, Claire's hand closed around his forearm hard enough to leave marks. Brianna made a sound, not a word, just a short, sharp intake of air, and then her attorney had a hand on her shoulder. Outside in the hallway, Devin Ruiz found Nathan by the water fountain. "That's the part that keeps him safe," she said. "The rest takes longer." "How much longer?" "The criminal side moves at its own speed." She looked at him steadily. "You should know they're not just charging the neglect. The false report is a separate matter, and the financial piece is being handled by a different office entirely." Different office. Money crimes have their own people, their own timeline, their own consequences. Ruiz almost smiled. "She's going to be answering questions in more than one room, Mr. Callaway." Nathan thought about Brianna standing at the bottom of his porch steps in a gray cardigan, telling him he had no right. She had come to that house absolutely certain of how this would go. She had a lawyer, she had custody, she had 3 years of practice, and she had expected to spend this winter watching Nathan Callaway defend himself against an accusation that he had taken her son. Instead, she was the one being asked to explain. The criminal case ended in September, 10 months later. Nathan sat in the 3rd row. He had been in that courtroom 4 times by then and still didn't like the smell of it. Old wood and floor polish and cold air. The radiator still clanked. Brianna had taken a plea on part of it and gone to trial on the rest, and the rest had not gone well for her. The verdict had come back 3 weeks earlier. Today was sentencing. She looked different again. The weight had come off her face and stayed off. Her hair was longer and untidy. The soft voice was still there when she spoke, but it didn't do the same thing anymore because everyone in the room had now read a transcript of the other 3 versions. Her attorney asked for leniency. He talked about grief again. It was thinner the 2nd time. The judge spoke for a while about the money, and then about the report, and then he said the thing that Nathan carried out of the building with him. He said that of everything in the file, the detail he could not get past was that the child had been told about the report. That a mother had filed a document declaring her son missing and had then used it as a threat against him while he sat in her house. He said there was not panic and it was not grief. He said it was planning. Then he pronounced the sentence, and Brianna Callaway was going to prison. Nathan didn't move. He was aware, distantly, that some part of him had expected to feel something big. Relief. Satisfaction. Something with heat in it. There was nothing like that. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. He didn't look at anyone in the gallery to see if they were looking at him. He turned his head and looked at Lucas. The boy was 10 now, and taller by 4 inches than the kid in the wet shoes, and he was sitting beside Claire in a shirt with a collar that he had insisted on wearing. His hands were in his lap. He was watching the front of the room, and his shoulders were down. That was what Nathan noticed. Not tears, not shaking, nothing dramatic. Just a boy sitting in a chair with his shoulders relaxed, the way a kid sits when he isn't listening for a car in a driveway. Nathan had not seen him sit like that in 2 years. That was the whole of it. That was everything Nathan felt in that room. And it wasn't victory. It was a boy's shoulders. Afterward, in the corridor, they were bringing her out. Nathan was standing near the wall with his coat over his arm, waiting for Claire and Lucas to come out of the side room. He hadn't planned it. He wasn't looking for the moment. Brianna stopped when she saw him. For a second she just looked, and whatever was in her face then was the most real thing he had ever seen on it, because she wasn't building anything anymore. There was nothing left to sell. Then she said, "You ruined my life." The corridor was not crowded. 2 people heard it. Nathan looked at her. "No," he said. "You let a beat go by. You did that yourself." Her mouth opened. He didn't wait for it. He turned and walked toward the side room where his wife and his brother's son were putting on their coats. And he did not look back at her. Not once, not at the sound of the door, not at anything. He never forgave her. He wants to be clear about that because people ask. People assume a man softens on a thing like this eventually, that there's a phone call one day, years later in a conversation, and some kind of peace. There wasn't. Nathan Callaway does not believe that everybody deserves to be forgiven, and he does not believe that carrying it would have made him lighter. What he believes is simpler than that. He believes a woman looked at his brother's son and saw an obstacle and told him his father had left him nothing and put a thread in his hands and let him carry it alone in a locked house at night. He never planned to forgive her. He never did. A year after that, Lucas lived in the house permanently. It was legal by then. Signed, filed, done. There had been a morning in an office with a notary and a bad pen and Claire crying into a tissue. Lucas had asked afterward if he was allowed to keep his last name, and Nathan told him he'd better, because it was the only good thing their father ever passed down. The 2 boys were inseparable, and it did not look the way people imagine when they hear that word. They argued about whose turn it was on the good controller, about whether pausing counted as quitting, about whether a rule invented on Tuesday applied on Thursday. They fought over the last of the cereal. They raced to finish homework, and then argued about whether it was a fair race, because one of them had spelling and one of them had math. Mason told people Lucas was his brother, not his cousin. He'd corrected a teacher about it twice. Normal things. Loud, stupid, ordinary things. Things Lucas had almost forgotten how to do. The change had not been fast. There had been 11 months of counseling, a stretch that first winter where he wouldn't sleep with the door closed, and a bad week in March when a car door slammed outside, and he went white and didn't speak for 2 hours. There had been one night, 6 months in, when Nathan found him at 2 in the morning sitting on the stairs with his shoes on. Nathan had sat down beside him and said nothing for about 10 minutes, and eventually Lucas had said, "I just wanted to check that the door was still locked from the inside." And Nathan had said, "It is, and it's going to be." And then they had both sat on the stairs for another 20 minutes until the kid went back up. But the shoes came off, and after a while he stopped putting them on. It was an evening in late summer when Nathan came out onto the back porch and found him sitting on the top step. The light was going gold over the fence line. Somebody 2 houses down was running a lawnmower. The air smelled like cut grass and warm pavement. Lucas was holding a photograph. Nathan recognized it. It had been in a plastic sleeve in a blue backpack once. Derek, at maybe 35, squinting into the sun, standing next to a grill with a spatula in one hand and an expression like he was about to say something he thought was very funny. "Dad would have hated what happened," Lucas said. Nathan sat down on the step beside him. The wood was warm. "He would have hated what happened to you," he said. Lucas turned the photo over and looked at the blank back of it. "Did he ever talk about me?" "All the time." "Really?" "Constantly. To the point where people at his job used to leave the break room." Nathan stretched, his legs out. "Walt Hendricks told me that. Man said your dad had about 400 stories and 3 of them were about work." Lucas smiled a little. "What did he say about me?" Nathan thought about it. He wanted to get it right, and he took his time because the kid had asked a real question and deserved a real answer. "He said you were stubborn." Lucas laughed out loud. "That's it. That's the headline. He said it about once a month, usually right after you'd done something that proved it." Nathan looked out at the fence. "He told me one time you were 3 years old and you wouldn't get out of a puddle, just stood in it. He said he tried everything, bribes, threats, a cookie, and you stood in that puddle for 22 minutes because you had decided that was where you were standing." "That sounds like him," Lucas said. "That sounds like you." The lawnmower shut off. The evening got quiet. Behind them, Through the screen door, Mason's voice. Lucas. It's loading. You're gonna miss the start. 1 second, Lucas called back. He stood up and slid the photograph into his back pocket carefully, the way he always did, with 2 fingers. Then he stopped on the step below Nathan and turned around. Uncle Nathan? Yeah. Thank you for coming that night. Nathan understood exactly what he meant. He meant a phone that buzzed at 1:07 in the morning. He meant a voice saying, "We found your son," and a man standing in a dark hallway realizing it was somebody else's. He meant a frozen windshield and 31 miles of fog. He meant a gray door in a hallway with humming lights, and a chair too big for him, and a boy in a soaked pair of shoes with dirt on his knees, asking if his uncle was mad at him. He meant that somebody came. "You don't have to thank me for that," Nathan said. "I know." Lucas shrugged. "I wanted to." He went inside. The screen door banged. Immediately there was arguing about the controller. Nathan stayed on the step a while longer with his forearms on his knees. He had driven out that night believing he was going to find his son, and there had been one moment, maybe 3 seconds long, in a dark bedroom with a phone against his ear, when he'd believed the worst thing in the world had happened. It hadn't. Mason was asleep 6 feet away, safe, and had been the whole time. What Nathan found instead was the other boy, the one his brother had trusted him with, in a conversation that had probably lasted 40 seconds at a bank counter 9 years earlier, when neither of them had thought for 1 second that it would ever come to anything. He had walked away once. He had told himself it was patience. It had cost a kid 3 years. He was never going to do it again. The sun went down behind the fence, and inside the house 2 boys who looked almost exactly alike shouted at each other about a video game, and Nathan Callaway sat on his back step in the last of the warm light and listened to it like it was music. At 1:07 that morning, the police called because they thought they had found my son. They were wrong. They had found my nephew, the boy his mother had abandoned, lied about, and nearly forgotten. She lost her freedom because of the lies she told. I lost a brother years before that, but I was not going to lose his son too.